In the midst of trillions of naira loans owned by the Chinese government and other countries and organizations, the federal government is again getting Senate's approval for the conversion of a 40-year bond of the 23.72 trillion naira government and operated expenditure funded by the Central Bank of Nigeria (CBN) through its Ways and Means window. Government in the last few years have not been able to repay some of these loans, have reason for the conversion which the Senate approved. Correspondent in Abuja, in this report examines the impact of such loans from the government and the implication of the economy. You have the report.
Ways and Means is a loan facility through which the Central Bank of Nigeria finances government's budget shortfalls. Over the years, the government has borrowed from the Apex Bank without timely refund, not to talk of the 9% interest payable by the government. According to data obtained from CBN's website, the Ways and Means debt climbed from 17.5 trillion naira in December 2021 to 23.8 trillion naira in October 2022, showing an increase of 6.3 trillion naira in 10 months. Facts have it that the federal government borrowed 704.3 billion naira from the CBN in January, 226.3 billion naira in February, 507.7 billion naira in March, and 112.3 billion naira in April, and more in other months. These borrowings, however, not included in the country's total public debt stock, federal and state governments, which currently runs into several trillions of naira. Section 38 of the CBN Act of 2007 stipulates that the total amount of Ways and Means advances outstanding shall not at any time exceed 5% of the previous year's actual revenue of the federal government. But the federal government's borrowing from the Apex Bank has repeatedly exceeded the 5% threshold. The reason the total debt amount now stands at 23.72 trillion naira. Even the legislature that gives the approval frowned at how the debts accrued without due repayment.
The National Assembly will not condone the way and manner, the Ways and Means accrued over a long period of time. Ways and Means is not peculiar to our country. They become necessities, but there are procedures and processes and better ways of incurring them.
Distinguished colleagues, the Special Committee, after exhaustive deliberations, recommends as follows: that the restructuring sum of 22 trillion 719 million 703 719 billion 703 million 774,306.9 only for Ways and Means advances be approved.
Hearing the huge amounts involved, Nigerians wonder why the government flaunts its yearly fiscal policy despite borrowing huge sums from the Central Bank of Nigeria.
I know is that before preparing the budget, the income and the expenditure has been prepared. You have captured the expected income, the crude oil you are going to sell, the money I'm going to make from custom and exercise. You've captured everything. Now you know the income you are going to get. You have arranged your expenditure. You know how much you are using to service the loan. So what is bringing about the supplementary of about 23 trillion naira? It's very questionable.
Very, very well. They don't have to approve anything. Look at our load. Look at many things. What of those ones that they are approved? Where is it? Or do they squander it thinking that we have a porosity scanty brain in this our nation? No, it is inappropriate. It cannot be done.
It's a government of people, for the people, and for the people. But it's opposite now. I told you we'll have three arms of government. We'll have legislator, we'll have judicial executive. The only thing that is functioning in this nation now is executive, presidency. That's why even from the head corruption is more heavier than ever before.
Nigerian roads are still bad, education almost non-existent, economy in comatose, in spite huge local and international borrowings amounting to several trillions of naira. And with a few weeks to the end of the current administration, citizens are wondering if the current Senate has the locus to approve any finances to the federal government, especially when accounts of previous allocations have not been rendered.
Unfortunately, it's Nigerian way of doing things. The Senate that is already going, at least that issue should have been for the incoming Senate. Unfortunately, they decided to do it. What do you say? If they have all the powers to do it, well, life goes on. But to me, if I were them, they would have left it for the incoming government. Whatever loans or whether approval or another thing, the Senate that has about only 3 weeks to leave, if I were them. Outside the budget, government that have 3 weeks to go, they have not enough reason at all.
Absolutely wrong for the government, for the outgoing government, to go extra mile again to acquire more debts. It creates more debt into what we are into. It's not appropriate at all. Nigerians, we don't want. They should not take us for granted, for God's sake. Because a lot of us keep quiet does not mean that all of us are dummies. Nigerians are not dummy people. We have to get out of this. This is getting too much. A time will come when all this money we are collecting, the countries, the nations that are borrowing all this money, a time will come, will be at their mercy.
Judiciously used what was approved in the budget. Why give extra budgetary allocation again? We don't see what they do with the money. They don't tell us, they don't account to the public for the money. So I don't think it's right. I don't think it's right. Yes. Thank you very much.
With the Senate's approval, the president's effort to push through has now narrowed to the House of Representatives, which had rejected the plea for lack of sufficient explanation of the utilization of the facility. When the lower chamber of the National Assembly approves the request, the amount would be moved from the CBN book, where it is currently being serviced at 21% interest. President Buhari had hinted late last year that the federal government would spend an additional 1.8 trillion naira servicing the debt, except it is converted to a sovereign bond price at 9%, a reason for the Senate's approval. With the current interest of 21%, the government could spend as much as 4.6 trillion naira as the cost of yearly servicing. And if the president secures REP's approval in the coming weeks, the current cost of the loan would come down by as much as 57%. But that depends on if the 9% negotiated bond price subsides at the cost of commercial debt increase in the past month. Nigerians are wondering the possibility of realizing these repayment plans and their impact on the economy since the administration winds down in few weeks.